In 1999, on the same day, on two separate tours of Hampton Court Palace, two people fainted in the same corridor, in the exact same spot. A coincidence? Maybe. A hoax? Some say that's true, especially when you know what happened in that corridor. Others say it was a work of the Screaming Queen, Katherine Howard. Hi, my name is Bose. I have an MA in Early Modern English History, and on this channel, we talk about the history you don't learn about in school. This week, we're going to look at the ghost of the Screaming Queen and the Roman soldiers. Katherine Howard is mainly known for three things. She was the fifth wife of Henry VIII, and the second of his wives to be executed, and she supposedly haunts Hampton Court Palace today. History tends not to remember Katherine Howard kindly. She's often remembered as the silly young girl who was foolish enough to have an affair while married to King Henry VIII, who had already divorced two wives and executed another. In 1540, Henry had grown tired of his fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, and his attention had been caught by Anne's lady-in-waiting, Katherine Howard. Katherine Howard's precise age is not known, but it is thought that she was born between 1518 and 1524, and many historians believe that she was still a teenager when her and Henry began their affair. At this point, Henry was over 30 years older than her, and was also suffering from severe leg ulcers, which courtiers said could be smelt from over 3 rooms away. Catherine's uncle, the influential Duke of Norfolk, is thought to have facilitated the match between Katherine and Henry by purposely placing Katherine in the household of Anne of Cleves, where she would be visible and able to catch Henry's eye. He did this with the aim of improving his family's social position by having his young niece married to the king. Henry would annul his marriage to Anne of Cleves, and within 3 weeks would be married to Katherine. However, unknown to Henry, Katherine had previously had a serious relationship with a man named Francis Derham, which was thought to have begun when Katherine was around 14 to 16. Francis Derham was around 10 years older than Katherine at the time. Francis would threaten to expose his previous relationship to the king, which would shatter Katherine's reputation and her image of purity. Francis said that unless Katherine appointed him to a position of office, he would tell the king. Around the same time, Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of the king's privy chamber, began requesting favours from Katherine. There is historical evidence that Culpeper had previously been accused of murder and other horrific crimes, but his relationship to the king meant that he was never punished for these. In late June of 1541, Katherine and Thomas Culpeper began their affair. Recently, some historians have argued that Katherine did not necessarily go into this relationship completely willingly. The Culpeper letter, which previously was used to show Katherine's love for Culpeper, has recently been reanalysed, and it is now believed by some historians to show that Katherine was desperately trying to appease an older, violent, and aggressive man, rather than being totally head over heels in love with him. During the summer, Katherine also finally relented to Francis's pressure and finally appointed him as her secretary. By October of 1541, several high-up courtiers became aware of their affair, and Thomas Cranmer drew the short straw in that he was assigned to tell Henry about the affair. He was so afraid to do this that he actually did it while Henry was in the Chapel Royal at Hampton Court, and instead of telling him outright, slipped Henry a note telling him about his wife's affair, and then fled from the chapel. Henry ordered Catherine's arrest. Katherine is said to have broken free of the guards who came for her, and that she ran through Hampton Court screaming for Henry, knowing that seeing him face to face would be her only hope of survival. After questioning, Katherine fully admitted to her crimes, and she was executed at the Tower of London on the 13th of February, 1542, for adultery and treason. It is this story of Katherine running, screaming to get to Henry, that is remembered in her ghost story, and it is said that her ghost running and screaming through the haunted gallery can still be seen and heard today. Except there is a problem. The guards arrested Katherine in her apartment, where she is said to break free and then run to Henry in the Chapel Royal. Except, if Katherine had done this, that corridor, that haunted gallery, would not have been on the route that she would have taken to get to him. Or that's what historians thought, at least. Except that is, until recently, when historian Gareth Russell discovered that the layout of Hampton Court was very different in the Tudor era than it was today. So it would have been entirely feasible for Katherine to have run down that specific corridor in order to get to Henry. Stories of Katherine Howard's ghost, running and screaming through the hallway, have been made for centuries, with the Victorians even producing postcards with images of Katherine's supposed ghost imposed on the top as souvenirs. In February of 1953, Harry Martindale, a heating engineer apprentice, worked in the cellars of what would become known as one of England's most haunted houses, the Treasurer's House. He was knocking a hole into the ceiling of the cellar when he heard it, a trumpet blasting. At first, he thought the sound must have come out from outside, and then he heard it a second time. By the third time, the noise was so loud that he was positive it was coming from the other side of the wall in the cellar. That's when the Romans came. Harry saw a Roman helmet emerging from the wall, and then the entire Roman. And following him came a Roman sat atop a horse, and following him, Romans marched, two abreast, in lines through the cellar. They were only visible from the knees up, which has been put down to the fact that the Roman ground level would have been several inches below the floor of the cellar. As the Romans marched through the cellar, that's when Harry ran. The house warden came across Harry and took in his appearance, and before Harry could even say a word, the warden said, "By the look of you, you've seen the Roman soldiers." Little attention would be paid to Harry's story until 1969, when excavations in the cellar found that it had been built atop one of the major Roman roads running through York. Harry wasn't the only one to see the Romans either. 4 years after Harry had seen the Romans, the treasurer's housekeeper, Joan Mawson, was in the same part of the cellar as Harry. In fact, she was checking on the boiler that Harry had helped install. That's when she heard hoofbeats and trumpets, and then the Romans started to emerge from the wall again. Harry and Joan were not the first to see the Romans on their march through York, and nor were they the last. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, ghost stories can be an important tool for historians to look into a society's moral values, as well as what they thought should be remembered, and how emotional and traumatic events have been preserved through the centuries through telling ghost stories.